Something happened in Boulder this offseason that nobody's really given the proper treatment. Not the feel-good version the highlight packages put together, not the two-sentence blurb that circulated on social media. I'm talking about the actual story, what it means, why it happened, and what it tells us about something that goes way deeper than college football. Let me set the scene for you, because context is everything here. Shedeur Sanders left Colorado and chased the thing he'd been building toward his entire life. The NFL fair. Expected. Anyone who watched him play knew that was always the destination. But when he walked out of Boulder, the drop-off wasn't gradual. It wasn't a rebuilding year where you lose close games and see growth in the second half. Colorado went from 9 wins to 3. 9 to 3. That's not a dip. That's a structural collapse. The kind that tells you everything you need to know about what one player was carrying and how unprepared the people left behind were to carry it themselves. Now, the quarterback room didn't empty out completely. There's still a former 5-star on that roster, a guy with the size, the arm, the tape from high school that made every recruiting service in the country go absolutely nuts over him. All the tools, all the measurables, and yet heading into another summer, the head coach still hasn't locked him in as the starter. He's competing again, this time against a transfer with his own football bloodline, and neither guy has separated himself enough to end the conversation. That's the environment. That's the room Shedeur Sanders walked back into. Let me be really clear about something before we go further, because I think this part gets completely glossed over when people share this story. Shedeur is not retired. He is not on some farewell tour. He is a professional quarterback in the middle of an actual competition for an actual roster spot in the actual NFL. That means every single day of his offseason matters in a way that most people watching from the outside cannot fully appreciate. In that environment, time is almost a currency. The hours you put into your own development, your own film study, your own chemistry with receivers and coaches, those hours are the difference between making the team and getting cut. There's no slack in the system. Nobody in that position takes days off to do charity coaching sessions when their own job is on the line. Except that's exactly what he did. He carved time out of his own career-defining offseason, walked into a building he no longer technically belongs to, sat down with the quarterbacks, and went to work. And I want to paint the picture of what that actually looked like. Because this wasn't a pep talk. This wasn't him standing at the front of a room telling guys to believe in themselves and trust the process. By every account that's come out, this was surgical. Shedeur pulled up game film from last season, pointed at the screen, and started identifying the exact moments where everything started to unravel. He didn't soften it. He didn't wrap it in diplomatic language designed to protect anyone's feelings. He told them clearly what went wrong, and he told them why. The core of what he diagnosed, receivers not running precise routes. That's it. On the surface, that sounds almost too simple to be the reason a program falls apart. Receivers running bad routes. How does that become the difference between a 9-win season and a 3-win disaster? But here's what I think gets misunderstood about this game, and what Shedeur apparently laid out in that room, with a clarity that doesn't usually happen at this level. Quarterback play, real quarterback play, the kind that makes an offense consistently functional, isn't a solo performance. It never has been. The timing that makes a completion look effortless, the anticipation that lets a quarterback release the ball before the receiver even finishes his break. That entire system depends on absolute certainty. The quarterback has to know, before the play develops, where that receiver is going to be and when he's going to be there. Not approximately, not within a yard or two, exactly. The moment a receiver starts freelancing, running a route that's 6 inches off the designated depth, breaking inside when the play calls for an outside break, losing half a step because of inconsistent footwork in his stem, something breaks in the quarterback's brain. He loses the certainty he needs to operate instinctively. And once that happens, everything slows down. He starts processing instead of playing. He's confirming instead of anticipating. He's hesitating. And in college football, hesitation turns a clean pocket into a collapse, and a designed completion into an interception that lives on the internet forever. Shedeur, based on everything that circulated from that session, basically told them, this isn't a vague, uncontrollable variable. This is identifiable. This is fixable. And if you don't fix it, it doesn't matter how talented the guy taking the snap is. He is going to fail at moments that look inexplicable to the outside world, because the outside world never sees the route that was supposed to be run 3 plays before the turnover. That's not just insight. That's the product of someone who lived through exactly this, who felt it in real time from behind center, who knows what it does to your confidence and your rhythm when the guys around you aren't operating with discipline. That knowledge doesn't come from a textbook. It comes from surviving a version of this exact problem yourself. But here's the part I keep coming back to, the part that I think is actually the most significant thing Shedeur said in that room. He didn't just diagnose the problem and leave. He told them what to do about it. And what he told them wasn't a technical adjustment. It wasn't a coverage concept or a route correction. What he told that room was essentially this: stop letting it slide. When a receiver runs the wrong route, somebody in that quarterback room has to say something, not imply it, not hope the coaches handle it after practice. Say it out loud, in the moment. Set the standard and hold the line. Because every time sloppy habits go unaddressed, the quarterback's job gets harder for reasons that have nothing to do with the quarterback. Think about what that actually means for a redshirt freshman still fighting to win the starting job. Calling out a teammate's route discipline when you're not even the confirmed starter yet, that takes something. That takes conviction, real conviction. The kind you can't manufacture just because someone tells you to have it. And what Shedeur was apparently saying is, you don't need the title to own the room. You don't need to be the named starter to hold people to a standard. Leadership doesn't wait for permission. If you want this offense to function the way it's capable of functioning, then you have to be the person who refuses to let it not function, starting right now, before the first real snap of the season. For a young quarterback, that's a completely different frame than the one most guys walk in with at that age. Most talented quarterbacks at 19 or 20 years old are thinking about their own performance, their own mechanics, their own stats. The mental shift from how am I playing to how is this entire operation playing and what is my responsibility in making it sharper? That's a leap that takes some players years to make. Some never make it. Shedeur apparently walked into that room and handed it over for free. Then, apparently, he went even further into the processing side of the game, the pre-snap and post-snap reading that separates quarterbacks who look talented from quarterbacks who actually win. What he laid out, based on the reporting, is that reading a defense isn't about picking a side of the field that looks good on paper before the snap and riding with it. It's about reading the whole picture, understanding what a coverage shell is genuinely telling you, noticing the moment a favorable look quietly shifts into a trap because of where a safety's weight is, and making real-time adjustments instead of just executing the play exactly as it was drawn up in the film room 48 hours ago. The defense didn't sit in that film room. They have their own plan, and you have to feel what's actually happening in front of you, not just run the script. That's professional level thinking. That's the stuff NFL teams pay quarterbacks tens of millions of dollars to eventually develop. And it was handed over in a quiet film room in Boulder on some random off-season afternoon to a kid who's still in the middle of his own fight to earn a starting job in college. Now let me talk about the response, because honestly, the response is almost as important as the lesson. There's a version of this story where it goes sideways, where a young quarterback, one who has heard nothing but praise about his talent for years, one who's been told since high school that he was built for this, sits in that room and feels what's happening as an attack, a public dissection of everything that went wrong, delivered by the exact player he's been compared to constantly, the guy whose shadow he's trying to step out of. That could be humiliating. That could plant resentment instead of growth. That is not what happened. Not even close. The freshman, by all accounts, locked in completely. He's talked about the experience in terms that I genuinely wasn't expecting to hear from a 20-year-old athlete, calling it humbling, calling it perspective he didn't know he needed, talking about what it meant to have someone who already made it through the exact same fire choose to invest real time in him instead of protecting that knowledge for himself. There was no ego visible. There was no defensiveness. He leaned forward and absorbed every bit of it. And I think that tells you something really important, both about where his mindset actually is right now and about how Shedeur delivered the message. Because the best coaches, the best mentors, the best leaders in any field, they know how to tell you hard things without making you feel attacked. They know how to frame the truth in a way that doesn't close you off but opens you up. The fact that this landed as a gift and not a wound says something about the person giving it, not just the person receiving it. I want to spend a moment on the bigger picture of why this story is generating the kind of attention it is, because it's not really about Colorado football when you zoom out far enough. There's already been a genuine debate among people who follow this program closely about whether retiring Shedeur's number made sense, whether a player who was only in Boulder for a short stretch had genuinely earned that kind of permanent recognition. That's a real conversation, and I understand both sides of it. But here's the counterpoint that keeps coming back, and it's hard to dismiss. How many former quarterbacks from that program, or from any program honestly, have done what Shedeur just did? How many have walked back into their old building, unscheduled, without a paycheck, without any professional obligation, and spent real hours trying to fix a problem that's not theirs to fix anymore? The answer, pretty much everywhere in college football, is close to zero, because that's not how this world usually works. Players leave, the program becomes the past, the focus shifts entirely to the next thing. As it has to. The fact that Shadur reversed that dynamic and did it specifically while carrying the pressure of his own NFL competition says something about his character that no interview, no combine drill, no 40 time can communicate. Here's what I think NFL evaluators should actually be paying attention to right now, because this is the thing that gets discussed in quarterback evaluation circles constantly, but rarely shows up this cleanly in real life. Intangibles, leadership, the off-the-field profile. Every scouting report mentions it. Every general manager talks about it in the pre-draft process. But what does it actually look like when you can see it? What does it look like when it isn't performed for a camera or timed perfectly with a contract negotiation? It looks like this. It looks like a guy who is fighting for his own professional survival, choosing to give away hours, real hours, in a real offseason, because he decided that the room he used to lead needed something he could provide. It looks like a player who understands that his legacy isn't just what he did when he was the one taking snaps. It's what he helped build, and what happens to it after he's gone. There's a mentality in competitive sports, and I've talked about this before, where players guard everything they know like it's classified information. Every insight, every technique, every competitive edge gets locked in a vault because the world they live in tells them that everyone else is a threat. Every other quarterback, every other competitor, every other player who might one day be compared to them in a headline is someone to protect against, not someone to develop. And then there's the other mentality, the rarer one. The one where a player understands that sharing what you know doesn't shrink what you've done, it extends it. That developing the next guy doesn't threaten your legacy, it confirms it. It's the clearest possible signal that you're secure enough in what you've already built that you don't need to hold it close to feel it. That is what this visit to Boulder actually represents, beneath all the specific details about route discipline and pre-snap reads and coverage shells. It represents a player who took a program from irrelevance to 9 wins and national conversation, who turned himself into one of the most watched college quarterbacks in recent memory, and who decided that the best use of a piece of his most precious offseason was making sure that foundation didn't keep cracking while he was away. He walked into that building with nothing to gain in the traditional sense. No headline was going to help him make a roster. No film session in Boulder was going to impress the NFL coaching staff he's trying to win over. There was no upside in the conventional sports calculus. Just a room full of younger players who needed something, and a guy who had it and chose to give it. The lesson was delivered without ego. It was received by every account with genuine respect, and the player who gave it walked out with nothing tangible to show for it, except that he cared enough to show up when nobody asked him to, and to say out loud what needed to be said when it would have been so much easier to stay home and focus entirely on himself. That is the version of leadership this sport almost never gets credit for. Not the sideline speech, not the post-game press conference quote, not the arm pump after a touchdown, the version that happens in a quiet room on a random Tuesday in the off-season, when a guy who doesn't owe anyone anything anymore decides that's exactly when he should show up.